Let's talk about when near-death experiences turn dark. As much as we love to hear about the blissful and the heavenly-like environments many report during their NDEs, there are others not so pleasant at all. But why is that? And does religious belief have anything to do with it? Let's get into it in this segment of Conscious Commentary.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks.
In my recent conversation with Billy Carson, just a week or so ago, he shared with me what could only be described as a very vivid and somewhat unique, I would say, near-death experience that he had while he was in the hospital after returning from a tour of Turkey, where he suspects he contracted a rare and nearly fatal form of pneumonia. But in the course of conversation, Billy also talked about how he learned that even though during his own NDE, he found himself, as he put it, in a literal paradise. However, this isn't the case for all near-death experiencers. In fact, there are a significant number of reported NDEs that aren't positive at all. In fact, far from it. Some are actually terrifying. They're described as unimaginably hellish. Some are isolating. And of this percentage, all seem to defy conventional religious expectations. Now, before we get into this conversation, I want to play this clip for you from my chat with Billy, and then we'll come back and chat about it on the back end.
It was so peaceful and tranquil, and I was in bliss. I didn't have any worries. All you feel there is this love. I talked about this with Dr. Daniel Amen. I went to go to a counseling session with Dr. Daniel Amen. He's the #1 psychologist in the world. He's also my direct psychologist. And I sat with him to talk about the experience. And he said, "Tell me more about this place." So I described like what I just said here. And he said, "Do you know that 20% of people do not go to a favorable place when they have an NDE? 20% of people go somewhere that horrifies them." And I was like, "Really? Wow." He said, "Yeah, 20% of people." So it's a good thing that you had a favorable, near-death experience, because 20% of people don't. And it was important for him to find out, like, where did I go? But in some way, maybe the ancient Egyptians were right where they show at the temples, your heart happened to be, lighter than a feather in order to pass through the gates. And though the Atlantean, he talks about, entering into the Duat to get to the gates of Arulu. And but there's guards there that protect the gate, and only the people that are worthy can get through these gates to higher dimensions.
He said only the people that are worthy can get through these gates. But what does it take to be worthy? Although that's a road I'm tempted to go down, I'm going to leave that for now because I want to get to this. Billy's psychologist, as you heard, Dr. Daniel Amen, told him that according to his research, nearly 20% of the reported near-death experiences are not favorable at all. Now, that statistic alone is fascinating, and it's a bit disturbing. But when it comes to the religious angle to all of this, which we're going to get into, and somewhat relevant to my recent chat with Billy, is that Billy himself had recently been at the center of a major debate about religion, the Bible, Jesus, and the accuracy of religious teachings. Now, if you've been following him, you probably know what I'm talking about. This debate, which happened late last year with a well-known biblical scholar, went viral, and the backlash for Billy was intense. Apparently, this was an unexpected meetup that came from Billy's ideas around whether Jesus was actually crucified and his challenging of the historical accuracy of the Bible. This basically rocked the foundation of a lot of Christian devotees when they heard this, and I'd say understandably so. Now, that being said, hopefully the chatter around this widespread controversy involving Billy and this other individual has calmed down, and I'm certainly not going to conjure up any further discussion around it. But this debate did get me to thinking, what happens when a near-death experience either confirms or challenges religious beliefs? And that brings me to today's core discussion. I want to talk about two people, Howard Storm and Mindy Todfest. These are two people with vastly different near-death experiences that completely transformed their views on faith and Jesus and the afterlife. Now, Howard Storm was a successful art professor. He was a hardcore atheist and someone who thought death was just nothingness. But in 1985, while he was on a trip to France, he suffered a sudden perforated stomach ulcer. He was lying in his hospital bed waiting for surgery, and he had, as he was there, an out-of-body experience. And that's when things, he said, got dark, literally. So instead of a tunnel of light, Howard said he saw shadowy figures in the distance calling to him. At first, he thought they were hospital staff, but as he followed them, their tone changed. They became aggressive. They mocked him, they taunted him, and then they attacked him. They actually attacked him. Now, Howard describes this as a classic hellish experience. He said the beings clawed at him, they tore at him, tore his clothes off, tore his, hospital bedclothes off, and they overwhelmed him, obviously, with incredible despair. He was trapped in what he could only describe as some kind of a demonic realm. That out of complete desperation, not knowing what else to do, he called out the name of Jesus. And the moment he did, this powerful light appeared, and he said he was rescued. Now, that single moment changed everything for Howard Storm. The lifelong atheist became a devout Christian in an instant. Obviously, there's a lot more to the story, but I wanted to just give you the cliff notes of that. Profound, though. So now, many years later, he dedicates his life to sharing what he believes was a real encounter with hell and divine salvation, most importantly. Quite a story. In fact, I found a great little documentary. It's only about 20 minutes long, where Howard details his experience in his own words and what occurred during this hellish NDE of his. So I'll link that below so you can have a look for yourself. So let's break this down, Howard's story. His experience seems to reinforce the classic Christian framework from the point of there being this dark realm that we could call hell with evil entities and salvation through Jesus. But here's what makes this interesting. Howard never believed in Jesus before his NDE. He wasn't expecting to see Jesus. He wasn't afraid of hell because he didn't think it existed. But when he was trapped in that torment, his instinct was to cry out to Jesus. And when he did, it instantly transformed his experience. Now, does this mean that Jesus is objectively real? That Christianity is the correct and only path? Or was Howard's experience shaped by something deeper? Maybe what we could call an unconscious cultural influence or even a universal aspect of human consciousness itself. Now, before we move on to another NDE story, I want to bring in another aspect of this as a contrasting NDE account or contrasting to his NDE account. It's a very curious and interesting scenario. There have been multiple reports of people who have claimed to have horrific and terrifying alien encounters, but the moment they called out to Jesus, the entities disappeared. One of the most documented cases comes from the UFO researcher Joe Jordan, who studied accounts where people experienced paralysis, which we know is often a common aspect to the abduction phenomenon. They saw strange beings in the room, and they had an overwhelming sense of fear. In these cases, the moment the person invoked the name of Jesus, the entire experience suddenly stopped. The entities vanished, the paralysis ended, and everything returned to normal. Now, skeptics argue this could be a psychological effect. Maybe calling out in the name of Jesus triggers a shift in mindset that breaks the experience. Okay. But those who believe in these encounters say something much deeper is happening, that these beings might not be what we think they are, at least in some cases. Okay. Now, that was just a quickie. I wanted to get in there because, as you know, we talk about the abduction phenomenon a lot here on Higher Journeys. But let's now contrast Howard's story with someone whose experience went in the complete opposite direction. Her name is Mindy Totfest. Mindy was a devout Christian, married to an evangelistic minister. She still is. Her faith was unshakable. So naturally, if she ever had a near-death experience or inevitable death at some point, she expected to see Jesus. She expected to go to heaven, and her loved ones she would see. All the things that she was taught were waiting for her. But when she suffered a sudden aneurysm while home alone in Oklahoma, her experience was nothing like what she imagined. She didn't float above her body. She didn't see a tunnel of light. Instead, she found herself in complete darkness, something that she called the void. Now, I interviewed Mindy early last year, and she shared her story at great length with me and our audience. She described how at first she tried to make sense of what was happening when she passed out, and she suddenly found herself in this black void, as she called it. She reached out her hand, but she couldn't see it. She tried clapping her hands, but she couldn't. Then it hit her. Oh my God, I think I'm dead. So she waited and she waited. She expected judgment. She expected Jesus, but nothing happened. No one came for her, no divine presence, no tunnel, no angels, just silence. She said that the longer she waited, the more heartbroken she became. She started questioning everything. justifiably so. Why am I here? Did I do something wrong? Am I alone forever? So this experience really shook her faith. Instead of reinforcing her Christian beliefs, it dismantled them. She came back from her NDE with a completely new perspective, one that led her away from traditional Christianity. Though I don't think she's completely abandoned its teachings, but toward a more metaphysical, universal view of spirituality. And I might add a profound interest in the extraterrestrial and UFO reality. In fact, Mindy has gone deep into the research aspects of this, and she's now a leading UFO investigator for MUFON, and I believe at the national level. So obviously, her NDE made her pivot into a whole new sense of mission and purpose. By the way, I'm definitely going to leave a link to my in-depth interview with Mindy so you can hear her story from beginning to end. You'll really enjoy that one. Now, let's do a brief contrast and comparison between Howard Storm's NDE and Mindy's. So, on the one hand, you have Howard Storm, the atheist, who found Jesus in his NDE, but Mindy Todfest, the devoted Christian, found only silence. Why is that? If Jesus came to rescue Howard, why didn't he come for Mindy? Why would an atheist be given a clear sign, but a lifelong believer be met with nothing? So, I have some possible explanations or theories, you might say. So you have religious expectation versus reality. Maybe Mindy's rigid expectations blinded her to whatever was actually happening. Maybe. Or could it have been delayed transition? Could her experience have just been a phase before moving into another realm? Or a test of faith? Was this an intentional challenge that was meant to push her toward a broader spiritual understanding? And another question, do our personal or subconscious beliefs actually shape our experience of the afterlife? The contrast between these two cases forces us to rethink everything we assume about NDEs and religion. If Jesus appears to some but not to others, what does that say about the nature of the afterlife? Is faith alone not enough? Or is the afterlife something far more complex than we can imagine? For now, I'm going to err on the side of the latter. I think it's quite complex. As per usual, when we talk about these complex areas of inquiry, obviously there's going to be a lot more questions than answers. And I have many, and I'm sure you do too. So definitely, as per usual, I want to hear what you have to say about this, especially when it comes to how beliefs, this is big, may shape our experience, not only of the afterlife, but how we experience reality right here and now in the physical state. But here's the biggest question, guys. Do NDEs prove religious teachings or do they challenge them? Or both? Howard Sturm's experience aligns with traditional Christianity, where Mindy Todfest's experience completely defies it. So which one is it? The truth is, I think, near-death experiences are deeply personal. They're wildly inconsistent. And maybe that's the real takeaway, that the afterlife isn't a one-size-fits-all. Maybe it's different for everyone. Probably is. If you enjoyed this fairly short discussion, there's much more where this came from. So I hope y'all are going to hit the subscribe button because we have a lot more to explore when it comes to these subjects of consciousness and the afterlife and the vast mysteries of reality. So as per usual, I thank you for watching and I'll talk to you real soon. Take care.